So, hello everyone. Welcome to our first podcast about cellular transformation. I'm sitting here with Jennifer Millar, who is the founder of Cellular Transformation. I'll start by introducing myself quickly. I'm Kanika Frings. I'm the co-founder of DIMA, which is a mystery school located in Mallorca that I'm at right now in Spain. We live here as a community doing the work and also providing a space for transformational processes, just like CT, cellular transformation. And that's what we're sitting here for, to hear about what is it, what do we do, what does Jennifer do? And so I'm going to start by reading the official introduction to what it is. So we're doing this podcast really because it is not easy to talk about what it is. And we've been asked to explain it many times, and we're going to give it a shot today. Cellular transformation is a psycho-spiritual healing modality that works with transformational energies to dissolve the energetic blueprints that are causing pain and limitations in our body, mind, and life.
The very short description. The surface one, yes.
I thought we'd start by just let us know how long you've been in the work for, and how did you start on this path, really?
Well, I've been doing the work for 23 years, and I met my teacher when I was 20 in Belfast City, which is where I grew up, just near Belfast in Northern Ireland. And I had an exceptionally profound experience when I walked into the field that he created. It's a bit different than the field I now hold for obvious reasons. It's evolution primarily of the process itself, and the uniqueness of how it comes through my body and being now. But at that tender age of 20, after having spent, I'd say, 2/3 of my childhood and teenage years in darkness, really a very dark emotional state. I attempted to take my life. I was raped and had just a sequence of very contracted, dark, fear-based experiences, as well as growing up in the collective trauma field of Northern Ireland as a war.
Yeah.
The lights were out for me. I was ready to leave. I mean, I really didn't want to be here. And lo and behold, I somehow ended up in a meditation circle, met an individual who worked with my soon-to-be teacher. I started tingling from head to toe as he was just talking about the work. I couldn't even hear the words, but I felt something in my system. And I just said, yes, sign me up, I'm coming. He was an American teacher. He flew over, and within 30 minutes of sitting in that space, I knew that was going to be my university. That was what I was going to study. That was my calling. I knew instantly. And I also knew at the same time I had most likely decades of hard work, if it was even remotely possible for someone like me to do what he was doing. And ultimately, what was he doing, or what was I feeling? I felt so much love in that space, and not the kind of romantic, let's say, horizontal type way of relating to others in a state of love, but a very much like a vertical divine love. And I was raised atheist, so with the war in Northern Ireland, being religious, my parents raised me atheist. So this was a very powerful experience for me. And it hit me like lightning. And that love in the field, the light, as my teacher called it, the Great Spirit was the name he gave to it. And which I think maybe his teacher did with him, for him. It's as if I immediately entered into a very powerful transformational relationship with that intelligence itself that was coming through that space. and I haven't
But
looked back since.
question, did you have a relationship in some way with the with spirit before that, and it was just kind of
Accentuated. Good,
recognition? Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
good question. Yes, in the sense or context of the Celtic spirituality. My mother's family were Catholic and not practicing Catholics other than my grandmother, but a lot of typical traditional Irish mythology and just beliefs and things that were very otherworldly and fairies. And so it was a mystical Celtic, ancient Celtic spirituality that was very normal to me. But when it came to God, God was a man-made crutch, for those who really don't have the intelligence to figure life out by themselves, was really ultimately my main message. So, and in truth, I still actually hold that atheism in my heart and soul when it comes to religious dogma. But this was a very different awakening that happened. It was, to me, as how would you say, not scientific, but so concrete in how real and tangible the experience was in the cells and tissues of my body. There was something that my teacher was doing, and it was not hands-on. It was really all just verbal communication and talking out loud to this divine intelligence that he called the Great Spirit, and which I've come to call transformational prayer, just to give it a name, that sparked or catalyzed a very powerful unraveling process at the cellular level. And I often say, well, how did I know it was cellular at 20 years old? And I'm not not a physics expert, because I was shaking. It was a somatic experience. Call it cellular, call it somatic. I mean, I was literally going through what you could also call a Kundalini awakening type symptoms in the space. Very powerful energy field that seemed to hit the nail on the head for me, in that, being from Northern Ireland, I think we Northern Irish have big bullshit meters. And I had been with a couple of psychotherapists and psychiatrists that just were so in their mind, in their approach to treating individuals. And I felt like I could see right through them. And this particular modality teacher, I couldn't see what was happening. I was really just consistently in a state of beginner's mind.
Do you want to say a little bit about what happens in the space, just for people listening that have never actually sat in one?
Yes. Well, practically speaking, we sit in a circle, and I, the facilitator, I'm playing spiritual music as for the first, let's say 30, 40 minutes in the space, so that we all can meditate. And the purpose of that initial meditation is to let the divine energy or the light build in the room. And it's like when you get more sensitive to it, most people can feel it right away, will feel it right away. But in time, it's literally like a river of chi or energy that you feel coursing through your system. And it immediately begins to unravel in a gentle way, mostly, what we're carrying inside of us, consciously and subconsciously, that isn't serving us anymore. Old fear-based patterns of energetic contraction. That could be described as trauma, yes, but I think the word trauma is potentially overused. And I would rather say that in the CT healing space, the light that comes through is unraveling and bringing out in the open fear-based contraction on a sliding scale, from something that happened yesterday that felt uncomfortable. Somebody said something to you, you braced up, or something happened on the bus, you witnessed something, to numbness and numbing effects of the food you ate last week and the alcohol you drank, all the way back to something that happened at 2 years old. You were, sexual abuse, for example. It's a sliding scale. It's really anything that's fear-based in the system that the intelligence of the light that's coming through knows you're ready to let go of. And I mean, that's a short, you're asking what happens in this space. That's why we're going to do these podcasts, because that, I think another important point to note, and you can certainly elaborate on this, Kanika, is that I suspect, unlike most modalities, CT, there's no agenda, there's no paper, no pens, no whiteboards, no itinerary of what we're going to do when, no particular practices that are scheduled in for 11 a.m. and something else at 2 p.m. The whole thing is orchestrated by the energy, the intelligence that's coming through in the moment, which then becomes a fundamental teaching in and of itself of the CT space, which is we're learning to trust something other than the mind, other than our mind that needs the safety of the parameters of putting things in compartments and understanding what comes next. That does not exist in the CT space. It's being orchestrated by something else. And that something else is what we call the language of energy, or the feminine principle of existence. And it beats by a very different drum than what our typical systems, our mind-based, linear, constructed realities operate from.
Yeah. And on that note, I was wondering, because of course, I mean, that's something that you do have to just experience, because that we can talk about it till the cows come home, I think, but that's just something that we also understand, in my experience, only understand through the experience in our body. So, but I am curious to hear you say a little bit about what you do in that space and what happens with you or through you in that space.
Yes. Well, I guess you could summarize it by saying that I have learned to get out of my own way, or get out of the way of these energies, in a sense, being a channel. So for those who are new, they'll definitely experience or witness me. My body goes through certain physiological things when the energy is coming through. There's often a lot of liquid coming out of my nose, and I'm yawning a lot, and I'm shaking and quivering at times. So it's pretty clear that there's a transmission coming through. And that channel that I hold, I often explain it as being like big, giant double doors, that my job as a facilitator is to keep the gateways or the doorways open so that this light can come through and do the work with the individuals in the space. My work, I mean, I always say that it's a co-creative healing process. We have 50% responsibility in transformation, and the divine or the universe has the other 50%. And my 50% is showing up and doing the work to listen. That's the primary function, is to listen to where the intelligence wants me to go, or us in the room to go at any given time, so that it, which is far more intelligent than we are, can unravel the next layers of illusion, ultimately, of illusion that we're carrying in the tissues and cells of our body. And in a sense, I'm following the breadcrumbs, or it's like going down the yellow brick road. I'm just like, okay, where does the energy want to take me next? And I've trained in that. I trained for years and years, mostly through osmosis and transmission, and downloading that structure by observing my teacher and being in the field as much as I possibly could. And that transmission that's happening, the spirit's 50%, the intelligence is 50% of its work is to actually do the transformation at the cellular level. That's not something I can do. That's not something any of us can actually do, but we can learn the art of getting out of the way so that a greater intelligence can do that part. And so that's something I think, and you can maybe elaborate on this, like what do you see? How would you describe what you see me doing? What is clear and what is not clear to you? But if it's anything like how I witnessed my teacher, for years, it was just a state of, how did he know that? How did he know to go there? And how did he know to go there next? And what's happening? What's he listening to that's orchestrating this incredible healing and unraveling process in the space without any agenda? Like, what is that is not so often, if ever, allowed or felt in our traditional societies and systems? That there's this incredible out of the box intelligence that's orchestrating everything that's happening in this space, yet nobody has a corner on it. Nobody is possessing it per se. Does that answer you? Or
yeah. I'm just wondering, like, okay, how did I experience that? Because it's easier for me now, just also maybe to let the listeners in that I do CT circles now as well. So I have a little more experience myself on what happens internally, as Jennifer's been my teacher and mentor now for quite a few years. But just going back at the beginning of when I saw you work the first time, and just what it looked like from the outside was like you just knew things that I can't say I didn't understand, because they made so much sense as they were happening to my perception in the body, that it was like I knew what was happening, but I didn't understand how you knew how to go about it, basically. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, though, the biggest like magic was happening when you were working with me, when I felt you were actually feeling in your body things that I was experiencing in mine. And that was just something that blew my mind, because you were literally like, can you feel, that coming up your left side of the body, like that tingling? And I was like, how in heaven's name can she know that that's happening? So is it true that you actually have the physical experience, or is it an emotional experience, or is it an energetic experience? Like, how would you describe what happens in your body? Also, I think even days before you might even be going into a space that you already start.
Yeah. Well, this points precisely to the fact that cellular transformation is not of the mind. It's very emotional. It's a very emotional experience. And yes, I do. Short answer, I feel everything that every person is feeling in this space. Thankfully, as the years have gone by, and I've worked with so many people, I'm not in the emotional state with every individual now as much as I used to be. Whenever I started doing the work, I would feel in every instance, I would feel, whether it's shame or sadness, terror, whatever those embarrassment, whatever those feelings are that are coming up, I would feel the emotional component, and I'd also feel what's happening in the physical body, the organs, the tissues, how the energy is moving in the system. Now, I think because I'm in that space so much, the feeling space is where I work, so I spend most of my time in that realm. I'm able to recognize and catch what's underneath the emotion, the energetic component to all emotions, whether they're creating expansion or they're creating contraction, and go after I can understand and relate to the energetics and then know exactly, okay, this is what's coming up in that person. I do still feel it in the body, in the organs and the different parts of the body, and can very quickly then, it's not bypassing the emotion. I can get underneath the emotion and bring the light in there in an individual's body and have them follow me in words and map down through their experience of what's unlocking in their body. I can map down through with spirit's help and having them follow me in words out loud to, in essence, dissolve it, you could say blow it apart, dissolve it, melt it. Yeah, and let the light kick in there. So
do you want to, yeah, go ahead.
I say the way that I fundamentally work is that I'm tuning into every single person and feeling the karma and the pain and the suffering that they're bringing into the space. It's really
so that your part and how would you describe, like, what does it do for them to repeat after you in words or talk to spirit in that?
I find that to be an extremely important and powerful element. Having them communicate, I feel, hits this from two perspectives. One, when I ask someone to follow me in words, then they're in a sense trusting me and what I'm seeing and feeling inside of them. And I'm guiding them to say these things out loud that I know are going to pull them down into even more vulnerability and open the doors inside themselves. You see, this intelligence that we work with wants to open the doors. The trauma, the part of us that's been traumatized or wounded, wants to keep the doors closed. The purpose of our ego is to nicely and safely keep the doors closed, right? So that we don't have to be wounded again in that same fashion. Very important function. But when we're ready, then in comes this higher vibration of love that says, okay, let me take that from you in a sense. But I'm going to come through Jennifer or whoever's facilitating so that you don't have to think about it necessarily. You don't have to consciously do that work. Someone else can guide you. So it's like I'm holding the person's hand, and the other hand that we're holding is spirit's. So in a way, it's a 3-person experience, or there's 3 entities involved. There's me, the client, and there's the universe, there's the divine. And I learned to hear the divine and follow the divine. And the second benefit, let's say, of having the client speak out loud to the divine, to spirit, is that they then learn it themselves. They're like, okay, I'm talking out loud to this divine intelligence with Jennifer's help, but I'm in a sense carving new neural pathways or new imprints in my body to know that, oh, maybe when another layer of this pain comes to the surface, I can work with spirit myself to climb down in there and touch it and transform it.
Yes, that makes sense. That immediately brings me to 2 more questions that come up for me. So one is, what does the client have to do? What would support them to allow for that healing to happen?
Staying open in their mind to the truth. I feel that there's an intelligence, a creative intelligence that only wants to help us heal and realize our true potential, or calling, however you want to say that. You could call that basic trust, and not necessarily everybody has that. But that's really then, if I may just throw in here, my role as facilitator, your role as facilitator is also to hold the individual with deep care and to create a safe space so that the the client or student can feel really safe to open those doors and let that energy in to themselves. It's really hard to describe it. What can they do? They really don't have to do anything. Actually, I often tell clients, so we're about to talk to the universe, which I happen to call the Great Spirit just because my teacher did. It has infinite names. And there's nothing you need to do to help it. In fact, the less you do to help, the better. I think a lot of us are trained in certain modalities where we think we have to push the river upstream to force that next emotion out or help something shift. And I have learned time and time again that the opposite is true. That the more we can catch something and be an observer of, this feels trapped, or this emotion feels stuck in me, let's say, or I feel suddenly disconnected from the process that was just flowing, then rather than, there's something wrong, I've done something wrong, something's wrong in this space because I'm feeling disconnected, what I teach and the approach I use is, no, this is a layer of disconnection coming up. It's like a sandwich, because we have, when we're wounded and traumatized and we lock up shop to keep that buried so we can continue functioning in the world, then there are many layers of numbness and disconnection and a pocket of fear, more numbness, more disconnection, dissociation, whatever all those different layers are. That's what the light is going to have to penetrate back down through. And our job is just keep the doors open and watch everything that's coming out. Now, if you're in a cathartic release, let's say, or you're deep in that memory, that cellular memory that's coming out, what I'm saying is eventually, when you train over many years, yes, you may be able to process your own emotions, deep emotions that are coming up, and keep one eye and one ear on watching the layers. But at the beginning, that's not your job. That's my job as a facilitator. So I'm able to observe, here's another layer of disconnection. Okay, here's a layer of fear coming. Here's whatever it is that's coming up. And I can help through the use of the spoken word with Spirit's help. Take one layer at a time as we gently move our way down through until we get underneath it, to love, until we get down to what was there prior to that original contraction, which is love.
Which reminds me, like you say, well, it takes some time to actually get to the place where you can do that yourself. In my experience, it's actually amazing how fast having you or having somebody take someone through the process helps us to reconnect to the place in ourselves that knows the place that you're coming from. I don't know if that makes sense, but the place where you get out of the way to let Spirit come, it resonates with people on such a level, in my experience, that it actually starts strengthening that connection to Spirit in themselves to a degree that builds the trust in their own innate healing capacity or capacity to move through whatever they have to move through, whatever shows up in the space, in the field, or also later than in just day-to-day life, which is really what I find makes this so powerful, that it's not just about, okay, here, we're looking at this contraction and trauma in the body that we're letting go of, but also it's actually starting to develop a new relationship with this intelligence in ourselves. So would you like to say something more about that?
Yeah, well, what was just coming to me as you were sharing is how CT, the space that I create, I want to make clear that I'm not going into that space, the sacred healing space, with the intent and purpose of going after trauma or fear-based patterns. That's not my number one intent. And maybe this is what might help differentiate cellular transformation from other modalities, is that fundamentally, I'm sitting down on that chair, and whoever happens to be in the room with me, whether it's one person, 0 people, or 50 or 100, it doesn't matter to me. I'm sitting down to open up my heart and my center, my hara, and my mind to the Great Spirit or to divine intelligence, to that love affair. And when because that's what I learned, that's the field that we're creating in CT. First and foremost, we're sitting in a very high vibration of light. The byproduct happens to be that light goes after anything that's not light inside of us. Some workshops when, let's say, I did one recently where a lot of the folks, 90% of the individuals there had been working with me for a long time. They'd just done another workshop not that long before. So there wasn't a lot of drama. There wasn't a lot to work on. And most of that time period was sitting, just bathing in that, holding that very powerful state of love and really reverence and gratitude for the divine inside the self and all around the self. Other workshops, it can be the complete opposite end of that spectrum, where, like, for example, if I'm working in my home country where there's a lot of war trauma, very fresh war trauma, the light, it's like trying to penetrate concrete, and it will push against a big block of darkness and have to bore and push at times just to get a crack in there, to be able to bore its way down and help these beautiful souls unravel what they don't need anymore. So I just want to emphasize that fundamentally CT, it's not let's say, a trauma healing space. It's a spiritual path. It's a way to, in a sense, put our relationship with that divine energy first, with our own path to awakening first. And anything that comes on that path then that is a boulder, a blockage, the next layer of our childhood issues, our epigenetic inherited generational trauma, whatever it is that comes up, then thankfully the Great Spirit, the intelligence, has offered us a set of tools to be able to get through it rather quickly, might I add. Like, it's a very fast, high speed process of getting through those or working with those boulders so that we can keep moving forward.
So if you'd have to just like put it into, like, say, I'm here, I'm coming to you, Jennifer, I would love to come to a CT circle. Like, what is it? What can I expect? And is it for me?
Mm-hmm. Cellular transformation is a very powerful and very advanced transformational field. And if you are really hungry to dismantle whatever is in the way of you living in the light, creating a life for yourself where, not in an irrational sense, which is to think we could live in light permanently all the time, but as much as we humanly can to keep our vibration up, and you're willing to do whatever is necessary to allow that energy to keep moving through you, then I would say CT is for you.
And what does it mean, whatever is necessary?
There is a basic requisite to sit in the CT field, and I would summarize it as being for individuals who are deeply passionate and deeply hungry for self-realization. And what does that mean? I feel that, like myself, I can really only speak for myself in this example of my life. I was at the end of things weren't working for me anymore. And when I discovered the light through my teacher and this lifestyle of relating to the light that I learned from him and others, that for me to stay connected to that light, to stay connected to that intelligence, which really just makes me feel, it keeps a level of energy and chi moving through my system all the time. I'm open. It's just a state of openness, really. That's what it is. It's a state of connection to myself and a state of openness and a beautiful place of love and trust. It is feeling love. For me to stay connected to that, then I have to be willing to own my blind spots, to own whatever is coming up in me that may be unconsciously creating suffering for myself or other people around me. And in turn, I expect that of those in my field too, that if there's any ego pattern operating that is not allowing that chi to flow unimpeded, then can we work together as a team? Me and that individual, whether it's my lover and my partner, or in a group setting, or in a community, live-in community setting, or with a client on the computer screen, whatever is blocking. If there's a willingness, great, let's work with spirit to unravel that block. But sometimes the ego will get in there and defend and try to protect what it's holding on to. And I think anybody who's listening to this that is passionate about their path of awakening will understand and recognize that that means you're going to have to get really uncomfortable at times and accept that there's a lot you don't know. And there's the potential for blind spots operating in you that you can't see because that's the definition of a blind spot. So to have other people around you help point those things out, then can you work with that feedback to soften that edge, to melt that armoring in a way that is how would you say? I mean, it's really a unique individual process for everybody as well. It's not a formula. It's not one size all fits formula, but for some, that's a very gentle process that can take years. And for others, it can be a process that takes 5 minutes. And really, the intelligence of what spirit's doing can tell what we need on an individual basis. So I guess, are you really willing to do the work? Kind of like you said about what Dima does, we do the work. And where are you at then in your journey of awakening and healing? Are you hungry and passionate to keep leaping? I certainly know that for myself, if there's something surfacing in me, a behavior pattern that is causing my children, my partner, my community members, my clients to contract in fear around me, to feel like they're not feeling safe to be in their truth and flow, I want to hear about it. And thankfully, my teacher taught me how to, like, specific set of tools, which is what I teach. I personally think I teach a little bit more of a refined version now of how to receive that kind of information and feedback from your environment so that you can move through that blind spot as quickly as you can to get back on track, to get back to connection, to really say, oh my goodness, I had no idea. I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of that. And thank you so much for pointing it out. And I'm going to do everything in my power to take you in through Mahara, take in the intelligence and the wisdom that's coming behind your feedback, deep into the cells of my body and let it rewire me let it do the work to clear out this old behavior pattern. And with the help of my teacher, my Sangha, my loved ones, and with full understanding that that negative behavior pattern that was causing suffering for people that I couldn't see only exists because it's blocking some sort of wound or trauma in me. So chances are that if I do that work to surrender and take in their feedback, whether in community or in with my partner, that at some point I'm gonna be vulnerable, very vulnerable and raw. And there's going to be some sort of wound come up. Mm. And in that place, then a lot of tools and care taken to nurture that wound and care for the vulnerability that's surrounding it, and be able to walk through that into really a new place on the inside, a new place on the outside.
Yeah, well put. I mean, for me, it's really the piece, as sensitive as it is, as potentially controversial as it may seem in terms of feedback and all of that. It's what I found is definitely a big part of why it seems like such a fast transformational process. I think that's, because there's many elements, but definitely one of them I can see in my own community, what an immense lightning speed train it has been since we've been bringing this in, of unveiling these places where we just can't see it, which means like I can, like stand on my head with all the understanding I have of trauma and all the modalities I've learned and all the work I've done around. But if I can't see it, I can't see it. And I need somebody to point it out to me. I need that. I want it. I'm hungry for it, which is, I think, another thing to be said about who it's for, is really people that really want that. And that is also, of course, a fine line, because I know that when I started DEMA, a lot of people come thinking they want that, or at least saying that they want it, and then living in a community, and as communities, go, it's already fast growth to begin with. Not even if you don't have a modality like CT to support it, but yeah, the moment that really things start surfacing, they run for the hills, and so I think that's something to add. Yeah, it's very fast, but you have to want it, and it's also for everybody involved. It's just
it's not for the faint-hearted, in the sense that you have to really want it, and you have to really want truth. You have to really want to know the truth about yourself, and I feel, have to want to understand how the universe works and develop a relationship, an intimate, personal love affair with the universe, with the divine, and be prepared to embark on or speed up. I'm sure a lot of folks in your community, as an example, are already very much on the path. Perhaps what CT then is saying is, well, be prepared to either step on that path if you're not already, or have it sped up significantly. And yeah, I mean, like you said, there are controversial components to it. I think that the reason it's controversial is because it lives on the edge. There's something about the intelligence of the light that comes through that doesn't beat around the bush, and it doesn't want to support certain ego frameworks that are reinforcing fear and disconnection. And so it will look for it being this light, will navigate through and around and straight between to get us to the edge. Because my feeling is that that's where the most expansion is. Just a very powerful place of love and gratitude for spirit, and feeling that in the body all the time, and being willing then, okay, if something's getting in the way of that, okay, let's work together as a team to work with spirit to shine light on what it is that's in spirit's way.
And I think it's fair to say, you've mentioned it before, that it's not just a group or a modality, but it's really a lifestyle to develop that relationship and the commitment to that place in ourselves, really nothing to do even with teachers or
exactly.
Definitely has changed my life.
May I ask you how? Like, how would you describe, or how would you describe how it's changed your life? Through which lens? Like through the spiritual component, that relationship to spirit, through the truth component that speeds up the transformation and the healing. I'm curious, what is it about CT that sparked something in your community or in your reality?
So when I met you, I mean, actually it was really a time, I think I've been running DEMA at that point with my partner. So not my original partner, that we were three, then one left, and then it was my partner. And at that point, it was just the two of us, of course, with people living in the community. And I was coming to a point that I felt like I can't do this anymore. Like I'm burned out, or I will burn out. It was really like I was really on an edge, and at the same time, though, I knew I was where I was meant to be. So already it had been a very transformational process up until then. So everything felt like I'm right on time here, but I knew something had to change, but I did not know what it was. I knew like I can't continue like this. Something has to change. And I was actively looking. I was asking for help with it, because it was like a knowing in a place of myself that something has to change, and not knowing what it is, and knowing that so that question was really burning in me, and it was also coming together with the whole question around what is leadership, and especially in the spiritual realm, where I was missing some kind of support or reference points. Yes. as to what kind of leader I wanted to be. First of all, I never wanted to be a leader to begin with, but here I was like put in the position, because my partner, who was usually more in the front row of was not there anymore. And I knew that somehow the way that I was doing it, even though people were responding very well, did not feel that it wasn't working for me on some level. Yeah. So a friend of mine told me about you, and was like, she's going to be next weekend. It was like that. It was like next weekend she's going to be in Berlin, and there are a couple of spaces left. And you want to go, if you can go. And unbelievably, a group that was supposed to happen, the facilitator had put his back out, and so suddenly the weekend was open, and there was the 2 spaces for us, and we flew over. And when we arrived in the space, I've told you this before, it was like we were a little late, music was playing, and we looked at each other, and it just felt like we're in the right place. Like somehow I just knew, like, okay, I didn't know what, because really he couldn't explain it to me. He was like, yeah, I just think it's, I don't say this to everybody. He said as well, like, it's not for everybody, but I really feel that. And then already in the first evening, I think was introduction evening, I just knew something was happening there that I was looking for, and I couldn't explain it yet. It was a resonance thing. It didn't add up with my mind, because of course my background is, like I grew up with spiritual and therapeutic work around me, and I saw a lot, I knew a lot. And so on the mental plane, there was things that made sense, that didn't make sense, that didn't, how do you say, like, fit my idea of what things should be like. Talking to spirit, for instance, was very strange for me, and as it is for many in the beginning, or like a certain directness and communication, lots of things. Won't go into them now, but on another level, everything just resonated. Like everything in terms of the energy in the space and the way it was moving through you and being handled in the field, just was like thank God, thank you. There was really something that just landed in terms of something that I was looking for. And I still find it hard to put into words, as you can tell. And I do think there's a couple of elements that you already touched upon. One was my relationship to the divine has been there for a long time, and it was strong, which is also one of the things I think that just was met. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was like, okay, here we are. This is a space that is just as, committed to that place, I guess, or devotional to that place, or I don't know how you want to put it. And the other thing was the element of speaking truth. That was a big issue for me because of how I am personally. And I just felt that it was the first place that I found something that explained speaking truth that was not personal. That was something that we were all listening to on the same level. So there was this language of energy, I would call it now, that we actually have a new language that we can all learn, that we can actually agree on, that is not ego going against ego, that is like a third element, or like an objective party, which you can't really say that, because of course it still comes through the filter of and so on, but there's something that we are as a collective tuning into that was like a revelation. It was a revelation that immediately resonated with my whole being, to a degree that my mind couldn't fight it, even if it tried. It tries. I think many people have that experience as well, because it's just like, well, what are we trusting here? But something is definitely trusting. And so long story short, that was the beginning of really knowing that I have to, there was not even a question. It took a while, but knowing that I have to bring this into my community in order for me to be able to stay. It was not even a question of like, what else? Or it was either like, I have to change something fundamentally, otherwise I'm going to burn out. And it has changed everything since then. It also has changed a lot of people around, because of course it's not for everyone. And it was really like that. There is the point where for me it was like, okay, you come here, you say you want community, you want growth as fast as possible, you want to see what you can't see. And there comes the point of like, okay, well, are you going to walk the talk of that? Or is it just going to, or are you just, or is it just not for you when it starts getting uncomfortable? And because it is uncomfortable. I mean, like being in relation is uncomfortable to begin with.
Yes.
But then to also be pointed out things that the ego structure is not happy to see. And but it's been really the most, not just transformational, but also loving and connecting process for all of us that are here that I could have ever imagined. Because of course my greatest fear was like, I'm going to be here alone, with this great new tool, but it's really brought us so close, and it's been such a healing. And so that's sorry, I'm carried away there, but it does, like I just want to say, like, it really changed my life, and it's changed our life as a community. And which is also why I'm so grateful for this for this tool that you brought into the world, and for the and it is like, for me, it's also like, it's not who does it, it's really like we are learning this together. This is a language that we're learning together, that is a new language as we can't imagine it, because we've learned to speak through the mind to each other, and where often ego structures meet, and then we start battling things. But if we could just drop down to a place that is not about you or not about me, there is a place where we can meet, and it's always there. And we can, and it's, I mean,
and to me, that place that you're speaking of, that was such a revelation to you, that was such a revelation to me, that's home. And it's also what I believe is our awakened state. That's our true essence. It's personal and it's not personal. It's a state that we can step into that is, another way of describing it is just pure connection and out of the wayness. And the language of energy, we try to give words to it just to give it a name. But if we're all learning to listen to that same place, then it, in a sense, is the master, or it's the guru, or it's the ultimate teacher in the field that we're all paying attention to. And it is formless, and it assumes form at times to help guide us along the way. But it's this incredible high state of love or connection that is possible. And I know for me, when I first tasted it, that was it. I just became obsessed. I mean, there was nothing else that mattered then other than putting that first, because it also, like you mentioned, is so loving. It is so gracious and sensitive and caring and loving. And when you were talking about, there's it's uncomfortable, and then it's so loving at the same time. You could kind of look at that from the feminine, masculine aspects in a way, where it's a very compassionate, loving space, but you can't maintain a high state of love and compassion and connection if you're not willing to have the Zen stick sometimes, if you're not willing to receive wax when necessary, if there's something operating inside you that is preventing you and everyone around you from touching that place of connection.
Receiving and being willing to give, to hand out the wax sometimes, because that was, for me, of course, like I was like an avoidant, confrontational, like I would avoid it, but of course it was killing me. I mean, it was killing me. And it's not so much about like, oh great, now I get to, but it's about also backing up my own truth and finding a loving way to do that, and learning to do that, because of course you need to refine that message as much as you can, first of all, so the other can also take it in, but also because you don't want any residue coming, because back in the space to you. And
exactly.
But just one more thing about the movement of energy, the language of energy, because it's, of course, it sounds abstract, but like how you had said before, that it's like this energy. To me, it's like an energy that moves through the space, that kind of is the connecting tissue, let's say, and that it becomes very clear that where that gets stuck or blocked, which we might say the contraction, and then it just wants to open that in whomever or in whatever, because it can be also individual and collective. And then if that individual is open and opens itself up, it's just like, okay, so here we go, and then it can continue to move. And if the person doesn't, then it'll
That's right.
in a little. And
that's right. And it's analogous to just a river and a dam, and we're cruising down the river, and so long as there's no dams or blockages, we're having a great time. There's no problems anywhere. It's just life has challenges, yes, but we're cruising and a beautiful place of gratitude. And yet we all have dams. That's the whole nature of existing in the body. So when, like you said, there's a dam, whomever it happens to be in, even the teacher, it doesn't matter where the dam shows up, then what are we going to do about it? Are we afraid of it? We can't say anything to it because that it's going to scream and shout and throw a big shit fit and a big drama. Let's avoid it. So everybody just tiptoe around it. What happens when we avoid or don't support the light, the energy in dismantling that dam in whatever intelligent, loving way it can? If we don't support that, then what happens in the space? I mean, I'm rhetorical and not. Like, what happens? Something dies. I mean, my experience is that when things are not addressed and the ego takes charge, then these protection mechanisms start to rule the energy field. And that's in community, in a field, but also in the physical body, that we get dammed up, we get blocked, things don't move anymore. I am afraid I can't function in that. Some people can. I've spent years envying people who are fine staying a bit stuck. Like, you don't have to live on that edge at times where you're like, oh God, no, I have to say something. I don't want to say anything. I'd rather not, please. I'd rather be an ostrich, to be honest. But something inside is saying, no, you are not going to be an ostrich. Out you go. Face it. How much do you love life? That's really the question that burns through me all the time. So who is it suited for? The entire lifestyle of this cellular transformation, which is just a name given to this entire body of teachings and way of living. It's for those of us who are, yes, terrified of being the dam or confronting the dam. Yeah, you're not supposed to be good at it, or it's not supposed to be this easy thing to do, but that you're willing to do it because you know that if you settled for something less than that you're going to die, and you'll have these little incremental deaths, which is often the family systems we come from, right? These are our blood families that we didn't really do well in, that pushed us out onto the path in the first place. So yeah, that's my way of saying what you just said.
And exactly, not just that it's not for everyone, but not everyone has that calling also. It just happens that we and people that live in this kind of way and in these kind of communities, there's no choice really. It's just it's a calling, it's a longing, it's an invitation that we can't refuse, basically.
Yeah.
So I think we have come to a natural close of the evening. I do hope that it was informative and that we can have some grasp or taste of cellular transformation, which is not so easy through just words. And also I did want to talk about just shortly about what Jennifer does and where to find cellular transformation and what's out there in the world. So she does workshops around the world, but as you live in America, you're coming back to Europe, I think, in a week's time almost, right? You have 4 back-to-back workshops or 5?
4.
Yeah. They're all sold out, I believe, but you'll be back in April for another 4. Yeah. And then again in the autumn. So that is a possibility to meet the work. There is a prerequisite of doing a session with one of the CT facilitators before, if they haven't worked with you or me before. And other than that, we're starting a training program, Jennifer and Dima in collaboration next year at Dima in the Mystery School in Mallorca, Spain, which is very exciting. Very exciting, which you want to say a little bit more about that, Jennifer?
Just read off the title here that year 1, it'll be multiple years, but the first year next year, beginning, I believe, in May, is that right? Yes. Right after the workshops.
Yeah.
We're titling it The Fundamental Principles of the Cellular Transformation Process. This is where we start to really unpack and go in, dive in deep to the many, many facets of teachings that pour through in the CT field and space. I'm working on my book. That's been a never-ending project, but it's finally about to see the light of day coming soon. And what has come through in the structure of how that's being written are 9 principles that I'm really looking at, the fundamental principles of which I've just noted 9 of healing and awakening, and the lens through which CT approaches it. So next year in Dima, we'll be taking each of those 9 principles and looking at them one-on-one, one module, 1 week is 1 principle in 3-week blocks, 3 times of the year, if I'm not mistaken. And we will be diving into there's a lot of meat on the bone for each of these different principles. And we will be sharing a lot more information about them in the next coming months, like before the new year. There'll be more information going out in detail as to what we will be covering.
Exactly. And then also going deeper into what we just scratched the surface of today.
Yeah.
Also, the next podcasts that will come up are addressing questions that our community has. You can send us any questions you have, any unclarities, anything that came up for you. We'd love to hear it. Basically.
Yes, please. Very much welcome, because I've 23 years I've been doing this work. And when someone asks what is cellular transformation, I still don't know what to say. So or I say something different every time. So hence writing a book about it, many books to try to just explain what's happening. Our attempt in collaboration, CT and Dima next year, is the beginnings of getting that information out to the world and getting it into the body deeper, actually letting you understand how and learn how to do this transformational work for yourself. It's not a training at all for doing it with other people. That's something, that took me a decade and a half of hardcore, deep work. And it's not that everybody gets it. Some people are very natural, like you, Kanika. But that's not what this training is for. The training is ultimately to learn how to do this powerful work yourself, on yourself, with yourself. And if by default it's with other people, great. But that's the primary goal, is to work on doing it yourself.
And really, it's an invitation to, first of all, understand it, and to step into this lifestyle that is, in a way, moving with spirit in everyday life and backing up the energy in everyday life, so you don't have to get stuck and suffer the consequences of stagnation, basically. So
Yeah.
I'm super excited. And yeah, thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Jennifer, for
Thank you,
making the
Kanika.
time.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Apologies for being terribly abstract, but we will go.
Yeah, we hope it wasn't too abstract, and we can also, I mean, this is us hanging out together usually as well. We just like to dive into these subjects. So more to come.
More to come. Until next time.
Exactly. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.